All right. Hey, everybody. Jono Long here with the Pro Church Marketing Podcast, where we like to talk about church marketing, church growth, church leadership, all those good things. And really excited today to have Mr. Mac Lake with me, the founder of the Multiply Group and author of like lots of leadership books. And so we're going to talk about leadership today. And so, Mac, thank you so much for giving some of your time. How's everything going in South Carolina today?
It's going wonderful, Jono. It's so great to meet you and be with you and your audience today. Looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, man. Thank you for being here. Thanks for talking with us. And I'm excited about what you've got to say. Tell me just a little bit about yourself, your ministry, what you do, how you ended up here, and what all's going on. Because it seems like there's a lot going on.
Yeah, a lot going on, man. It all goes back to when I was young. I was 9 years old. I gave my life to Christ, and at an early age, just became very passionate about my relationship with Jesus. But I had a big problem. I was very shy. I couldn't look people in the eye. I couldn't have conversations. And so God used that season of shyness, which lasted until I was around 17, used it to really just cause me to go down in my basement, my mom and dad's basement. And after school, I'd go down there and I would read my dad's Barclay commentaries, Matthew Henry commentaries, Daily Breads, whatever he had, I would read it, and just nurtured a relationship with God in that season. And it was a little bit lonely at times because I was a shy kid and uh, struggled to make a lot of friends, but God really used it. And then when I got through my shyness and I felt like God was really calling me into ministry, I went on to Moody Bible Institute and then Dallas Theological Seminary. And when I was at Dallas Seminary, uh, this pastor, we were attending his church, and the pastor came to me one day and he said, Mac, I want to start meeting with you every Tuesday, and I want to give you a leadership book or a leadership audio or something. And I want you to listen to it or read it and then come in every Tuesday with your questions. And I just want to answer your leadership questions. I didn't ask him to do that. He invited me into that. And so for 2 years, he would meet with me and we would just talk leadership. And over time, he just cranked up the challenge more and more and more. And he would go places and I want you to come with me. All right. I want you to watch me do this. Okay. I want you to preach. I want you to do this. I want you to do that. And he just started empowering me more and more and more. And what I saw happen was just this transformation where I went from a doer to a leader. It was a total self-image switch. I didn't know what a leader was. I thought I was a leader. I'd actually been a youth pastor for a short stint, but I wasn't leading anybody. I was doing everything. And he taught me, he discipled me in leadership. And it was just transformational for me. And it gave me a passion around leadership and leadership development. And so that's what I've dedicated my life to, is really multiplying multipliers is the core essence of my calling and my life. And so a few years ago, I've been a church planter. I've started nonprofits. I've started my own business. But man, heart of everything I've done is all about developing leaders for the sake of kingdom expansion. So started Multiply Group 6 years ago. And now what we do is we come alongside churches and organizations and help them build out an intentional leadership development strategy so they can have more and better leaders, because that's what everybody's struggling with.
Yeah, I love that. No one ever admits to being shy, like to be a shy kid. Like I never. It's funny you say that because I did not raise my hand. When I was youth pastor, I used to tell the kids this. I was so scared in school. I did not raise my hand to ask a question until sixth grade because I was so scared of getting made fun of. Of course, I was a redhead. So I didn't, a redhead with a mullet in the 80s. And so, that was just prime target.
You got to send me your high school yearbook picture. I would love to see that.
Hey, man. Well, I'll do you one better.
I'll do you one better in the show notes.
I'll tell you what, man. Awkward Family Photos picked up pictures of my family and me. And you probably can't see it. We're on the cover of the 2021 calendar. And then they just came out with a new game called Totally 80s. And I'm a playing card in the game.
Is you for real?
That is me. That is me.
You ain't kidding about the mullet, man.
That head of hair will get you beat up. Let me just tell you. So yeah, that's so it all migrated. It all migrated
Yeah,
down,
yeah.
and but yeah. So that I was that kid, and had you told that nerdy kid right there, like, hey, one day the Lord's going to put you on stage, have you talking to people every week, I'd been like, you are out of your ever loving mind, and
Yes. Yeah.
that I would lead people. I was scared to just be around people, much less
Oh, yeah.
lead people,
Same.
and yeah. So man, I appreciate you sharing that. That's cool. And what made me want to reach out to you, other than just hearing that you were a cool guy, was with our marketing that we do for churches. My fear is I've been off a church staff. In January of 2020, we got together and said, because we've been preparing for me to transition out and come into this full time. And in January of 2020, we said, hey, let's make March 30th, 2020 my last day. We'll announce it Wednesday, March 11th. That'll be a normal week. It'll be a good time to do it. And that was the night they canceled March Madness. Everything was shot. Everything, it was all downhill from there. But the cool thing was, by the time we went back to church, everybody forgot I was ever the youth pastor. So it made it easy to stay while the new guy, settled in. But so I've been, man, I mean, 2 weeks ago, well, no, like, yeah, a couple weeks ago was 5 years that I've been off church staff. And so I have this fear of being irrelevant to churches because, we're trying to help churches, but I go to a church, but I'm just not on staff anymore. So I want to keep in touch with what churches are really going through. And so we started asking questions of pastors every month. And one of the main questions we ask is like, what's your biggest struggle? What is your biggest struggle? And I'm telling you, 75%, every time we ask that question, the answer is always several people saying developing leaders.
Yeah.
I can't develop enough leaders. I
Yeah.
don't, but then I'm thinking like, man, there's a lot of stuff written about leadership. There's, John Maxwell's got 973 books on
Yeah.
leadership. Like, it feels like it's a pretty resourced lane issue, but it's still a big problem. So like, this is a dumb question, but like, what's the deal?
Yeah. No, no.
What's the deal with that?
It's a great question because I tell people all the time that if you Google Amazon, YouTube, or podcast leadership, you're going to find gazillion results, right? And
Yeah.
so America is the most content rich nation in the world when it comes to leadership, but yet leadership development's the number one problem. In 2008, Leadership Network did a survey, and that they revealed that leadership development was the number one problem in churches of all sizes. In 2018, they recommissioned the same survey and discovered the same thing. Leadership development, number one problem. And so a decade passed and nothing changed. And so what I tell people is we don't have a content problem, we have a process problem.
Mm.
And so the content is there. Now, if you look at all these books, what you see is a lot of great content around leadership. There's not many books about building a system of developing leaders.
Hmm.
And so that's why I wrote The Multiplication Effect. And so when I am out there working with churches about leadership development and I see them struggling, well, number one, they're struggling because they misunderstand what leadership development is. I remember when I was trained as a church planter, I was so excited. I was scared to death. I was like, I don't know how to I don't know how to plant a church. And
Yeah.
so I go to this 2-day boot camp. A guy lectures at us for, 8 hours a day for 2 days. And, he goes home and goes, woo, I just trained 25 church planters. But I went home and went, honey, I still don't know what I'm doing. I got a notebook with
Right.
273 fill in the blanks. And so in America, we think, oh, if I said it, you got it. If I said
Yeah.
it and you heard it, that's leadership development. And it's all about dumping information, not producing transformation. And so the American church doesn't know how to produce transformation when it comes to the leadership competencies and character of the individuals we're developing. And so what we do is we find a new leader or potential leader and we go, oh, wow, okay, thank you. You're willing to step into this leadership role in the church. We're going to train you. We're going to let you shadow somebody for 2 weeks, and then we're going to give you your own group or your own team. Well, that's the equivalent of taking somebody who's never played baseball and saying, I'm going to put you in a batting cage. I'm going to throw you 2 pitches and then put you in a ball game. You're still going to strike out. It's just not enough. And we're not giving them enough training experience. The apprenticing process is totally done wrong, and if it's done at all. And so that's the number one problem, is a misunderstanding of what leadership development is. And then the
Yeah.
second problem is fear. So like when I'm working with a church, a lot of times I will send them a training module. And I'll tell them, I'm going to do this training module with you. I'm going to show you what it is to apprentice a leader. And so when I get there, there might be 20, 30 people in the room. I pick two people out of the audience. I put them around a small table and I do a 1 hour conversation with those two people around that training module. And I look at everybody else and say, pretend you're not here. I'm going to model what an apprenticing session looks like. You're going to watch these two people transform right in front of your eyes. You're going to see them grow as leaders today through this little conversation. An hour later, I stand up and say, okay, tell me what you saw. And people are like, oh my gosh, I've never seen anything like that. Oh my gosh, that looks so easy. Oh my goodness, you didn't even talk that much. You just kept drawing things out of people. Oh my goodness, you could tell they were learning, they were growing, they were so engaged, they were so enthusiastic about the content. And so I'm like, yes, this is how you do it.
Yeah.
But even after I model it, some people challenge them to go do it, pick two people, and many of them are going, I'm scared. And then the third reason is pride. We just feel like nobody can do it as good as me. If I let go of this, they might do it wrong. So I'll just do it myself.
Huh. Wow. Okay. So that's amazing stuff. And I got like 15 follow-up questions rolling around in my head now that you've said that. Because what one question is, I think about myself in transitioning from 20 years of full-time church staff. The only job I ever had straight out of high school was working at a church until 5 years ago. And the hardest thing for me, transitioning from full-time church staff to what I'm doing now, running a marketing agency with like 13 team members that I'm leading, was putting systems in place. Because as a youth pastor, like I was the system. It was just me. I mean, I had volunteers, but I did exactly what you said, what you're saying. Like, all right, you passed the background check, so you know you've never been to prison and you're alive and you're not smoking at church, so we'll let you lead. We'll let you lead a group. That's all we did. There wasn't a whole lot of training.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking like nowhere else in the world is that. I mean, every job you get has systems.
Oh, yeah.
Everywhere that any of us have ever worked. So is it just, why is it that how's the church missed it like that? What's made it so easy for churches to be the one that don't make systems for this?
Yeah. What we do is churches will hire individuals, or even if they don't have staff, they put individuals over different ministries, children, students, adult groups, worship, guest services, missions, those type of ministries, and they function as silos. There's no integrated, aligned approach. And so what we help churches do, we say, okay, you need to identify potential leaders and you need a thorough onboarding process that protects the church. It protects the individual. It adds value to the church. It adds value to the individual if you do it correctly. And so what we do is we help them build out an onboarding process that all 6 of those ministries can use. It's the same onboarding process, the same steps. There's uniqueness to each one to each ministry a little bit, but not as much as you would think. And so we show them how to identify those unique aspects. Like in worship, you're going to have an audition. You're not going to have that in other ministries. And so we help them build that onboarding process out. And it's just amazing. The staff goes, oh my gosh, this is great. We loved it. It's so thorough. It's so clear. It's going to help people have a great experience. But the reason we don't have that type of thing is we function in silos, and everybody at the top of that silo, like the youth pastor, well, I want this to be relational. I want it to be relational. I don't want people to feel like they're, going to the doctor and filling out forms and things like that. And I get that. But even a thorough onboarding system, if you execute it relationally, it'll feel relational.
Yeah.
And so they don't do it because we've not been taught to do it. And secondly, we think, well, I don't need it because, hey, I'm the one onboarding these people, which again makes you the bottleneck because you're doing it all.
Yeah. And you can spiritualize anything out and get rid of it. I remember you mentioned the worship team. As a youth pastor, I decided as I got older and matured, I was like, okay, we got to step up our game. we're going to start doing auditions. And you would have thought I denied the virgin birth, like that. We're going to make these kids audition to serve Jesus. Like, but what happened is the best thing that came out of it, all these kids that were good at some, this one kid was, he'd been coming to youth group for years, had no idea he played drums. He showed up for auditions and became our drummer and was amazing. But he was just a shy kid. He was never going to tell us that he played the drums. His
Yep.
parents never, no one ever mentioned it. So like, it's like, man, you get over the fear of hurting feelings and stuff like that. Like really good things come out of that. So in your case, like you were in church. Where did this come from in your world?
Yeah.
How did you learn this? What pushed you to start implementing these things in the church?
Yeah. I mean, pain, a lot of pain, a lot of mistakes and that sort of thing. But I knew early on that, so I was an associate pastor at Polly's Island, and I had learned to lead because that pastor taught me to lead. And so at that point, I was a decent leader, but what I didn't understand is how to scale. And so
Mhm,
I was leading when I was in Polly's Island Community Church. I was leading all our youth leaders. I was leading all of our children's leaders, all our adult small group leaders. I was leading our worship leaders. I was leading a lot of leaders. And
mhm,
about a year into it, I was like, I couldn't sleep. I was like, oh my gosh, I told my wife, I said, the church is going to fire me. She said, they're not going to fire you. They love you. You're doing a great job. I said, they're going to fire me. They just don't know it. I'm leading so many people. It's all getting ready to come crumbling down. And so I counted, there were 88 leaders that reported directly to me. And it was overwhelming. And I knew I couldn't serve them well. I couldn't know them well. I couldn't encourage them well. I couldn't train them well, and so what I did is I chose 7 people out of those 88. I went to them individually and said, hey, I want to put you over the adult group ministry. I want to put you over student ministry. These were volunteers. I want to put you over children's ministry. And I selected you're over missions and all this sort of thing. And so I selected those individuals, and then I began to spend a disproportionate amount of my time with those individuals. And I began to pour into them. And what I told him was, hey, this is not sustainable for me to lead this way. And so I'm going to give you leaders underneath you. I'm going to develop you. I want you to develop the leaders underneath you. I'm going to work with you. You work with them. And here's my promise to you. If any of your leaders come to me and ask a question or want help or want resourcing, I'm going to point them right back to you. I will not undermine your leadership. And so I began to put together a leadership pipeline. I didn't have the language at that point, but
mhm,
leadership pipeline, it's basically 5 levels, a development pathway in an organization. You got a group of people that lead themselves. It's from there, some of those flow up to lead others. From there, some of those flow up to lead leaders. From there, some flow up to lead a department or a ministry area. And then from there, they flow up to lead the church, like a
mhm.
pastor, executive pastor. So you got 5 development levels, a 5 level pathway. And so I began to populate this pathway without understanding what it was really at that point. It wasn't until I went to Seacoast when Pastor Greg handed me a book, and I was working with leadership development. Seacoast is a large multi-site church. He handed me the book, The Leadership Pipeline by Ram Sharan. I tell people, don't buy it and don't read it. It is a tough, tough read. But he said, figure this out for the church. It's a business book. And I read it, and that's when I learned the levels of the leadership pipeline. We put our own language around it because Sharon has technical language, business language. And man, all of a sudden, I was like, wow, this is unbelievable. We can actually put a structure together where people can sequentially move to different levels of leadership. We can put this structure together and have an onboarding system for each level of this pipeline. We can put a structure together and identify what leadership competencies people need to learn as they progressively move through this pipeline. And when we have this structure put together, we can actually put the names of people who are at every level of our pipeline, allowing us to have a roster or a depth chart where I could now look at every ministry and see how deep the bench was in that area of ministry. And it was game changer for me.
Wow. So, going from, because I think like my mentality for a long time, I think a lot of pastors' mentality is just like recruiting volunteers and they're kind of hoping for just already baked volunteers that maybe came from another church. They've got some experience rather than building from the ground up, because that takes time and it's painful and it costs money, it costs energy, it costs time. So there does, in a lot of the churches I've served in, it was just like, it seems like we were just trying to find people who are already amazing leaders rather than like you talked about, like in building a pipeline, and people got to start somewhere.
This is the problem. Yeah. I'll never forget, this young man came to me years and years ago. This young man came to me in my small group and he said, Mac, I want to do what you do. I said, what do you mean you want to do what I do? Man, I want to lead a small group like you. Man, we love each other. We're learning. We're growing. We're serving together. Man, it feels like family. He said, I want to do that. I want to lead a group like this. The whole time he's telling me this, I'm looking at him and I'm thinking, you can't do what I do. You're not ready. You're not ready. Because that was my mentality back then. And so I kept dismissing him. He wouldn't let go of it. He kept coming back to me, asking. And so finally I was like, okay, Roger, I want you to show up to my house 15 minutes early and plan on staying 15 minutes late. And every week I'm going to teach you one skill of how to lead a small group. He showed up the next week. I said, all right, here's how you build biblical community. You got to do this, this, and this. There are 5 elements of building biblical community. Let's go downstairs. Watch me do it. Okay. And then a group's over with. We come upstairs. I said, what'd you see me do? Right. What would you have done different? What questions do you have? What did you learn tonight? And I would just do every week. I did that with him.
Yeah.
It was 6 months later. We launched him out to start his own group. And what I learned from that is in the American church, we're looking for readiness, not willingness. And there's a shortage in our leadership pipelines today because we never built a culture of leadership development yesterday. And if we don't start building a culture of leadership development today, where we begin to look at people who are not ready, but they're willing, and we begin to develop them, if we don't start doing that today, we're going to have a shortage in our pipelines tomorrow. And so it's a major, major problem. We've got to learn to stop looking at people for what they are today and learn to look at people for what they can be a year from now or 6 months from now if I develop them, if I pour into them. We just don't look for potential. We look for readiness. And that's a huge mistake. And because we're only looking for readiness, the American church is doing leadership placement, not leadership development.
Yeah. Wow. That's good. That's good. Yeah. I remember, thinking it, some of the churches I served in, like, yeah, man, there's people weren't necessarily ready to be thrown into leading a small group or in charge of a mission trip or something, but they're pretty important at their job. Got some, they must know something, because I know what they do at work, and we need to figure out a way, like, because I would also think somebody that's got some skills at their job, if they're a high capacity person, they're only going to sit around doing nothing for so long. Then they're going to go somewhere else where that church will use them, put them in the leadership pipeline. And so, yeah, it's like we're missing out on some big opportunities there.
Wow. Oh my goodness. So when I planted my church, Carolina Forest Community Church, when I planted that church, I announced it. We had 16 people go, all right, I'm in from our existing church from Polly's Island. They're, yep, we'll go with you. And the church was supportive and they sent us. I would drive up to Myrtle Beach every day before I launched church. I'd drive up every day, have breakfast, lunch, and dinner with people, just meeting people. I would mix and mingle with anybody and everybody. And I'd tell everybody about this brand new church plant. And so over a few months, probably over the next 5 months, we built our core group up to 70 people. Still had not launched publicly. Now, out of that 70 people, I was literally doing breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day, and coffees. And just every day meeting with people, getting to know people, getting to know their story. And so about 4 or 5 months into that, I selected 7 key leaders. Now, these are volunteers, but I found a guy who was a bank vice president. I said, all right, will you oversee our admin and all our guest services? Yes. I found another guy. I said, oh my gosh, he was a manager of a radio station. I said, will you oversee our small groups? Absolutely. I found a guy who was head of HR for a lumber company. I found a lady who was a former school teacher. She oversaw our children's. So I found all these people, and in volunteer roles, I put them over ministries.
Yeah.
And again, told them, I'm going to lead through you guys.
Yeah.
And they crushed it. And here's what I would do with them. I would meet one-on-one with them every 2 weeks. And then we would meet as a group every 2 weeks. So again, these people are volunteers. But I don't know if you're old enough to remember this, but I would take a carbon paper with me. It's the type where
Yeah.
it's
Oh
white,
yeah.
it's yellow underneath. And
Yeah.
it had at the top of it, it was written one-on-one goal setting.
Mhm.
And every 3 months, those 7 key leaders had to write down 3 to 5 goals that they were going to accomplish in their area ministry. We'd sit down, we'd write it out on a piece of paper. I'd tear that carbon paper, I'd hand them their copy, I'd take a copy. And then in our one-on-ones, every one-on-one, I'd sit there and go, all right, tell me how you're doing with your priority goals. What's moving forward? What's not? How can I help you? I held them accountable to the goals. They loved it. And they crushed it. And so, in American church, we're lowering the bar of leadership. Jesus never lowered the bar of leadership. He only raised it. And this concerns me because just like you said, there are people out there in our pews who are high capacity leaders
Mhm.
and there's no spot for them in the church. Well, they should usher, they should be a greeter. And they think they're above that. No, they don't. They've already done servant leadership. They
Yeah.
know the value they can bring to the church, and they want to bring significant value. And so there are two significant reasons I think we need to prioritize looking for high capacity leaders. Number one, we're not utilizing kingdom talent. We're not fully utilizing kingdom talent. Tom Schultz did research on something he called the rise of the Dones. These are Dones, people who
Mhm.
are going, I'm done with church. And
Yeah.
one of the things he discovered is that it's mature believers who've gotten bored and they're like, I want to make a significant contribution. That's my options are be a volunteer in the church or be on staff at the church. There's no in between, like the leadership pipeline offers some in between.
Yeah.
There's no in between. And so they're just like, well, I guess I'll go start a nonprofit. I guess I'll go serve my local school. They start serving in other areas. The second problem, or second reason we need to prioritize looking for high capacity volunteers, we're wasting kingdom dollars. We're
Hmm.
wasting kingdom dollars. Churches will hire in a second.
Yeah.
I was with a church recently and I was there for a conference and the pastor said, hey, we're building a leadership pipeline. I said, oh, I'd love to see it. So I go in his green room. We're sitting there and he's showing me his pipeline and he's talking about, yeah, we're getting ready to hire two new I got a children's director, but we're getting ready to hire 2 people to help her. I said, go get your children's director. So he ran down the hall. He got her. I said, tell her to bring her computer. She brought her computer. I worked through the numbers in her leadership pipeline. They had like 300 kids that attend the church. And so I worked through her numbers in leadership pipeline. And I said, I understand you're getting ready to hire a couple of people. Oh, yeah, I need it desperately. I said, can I challenge you on it? She went, sure. I said, I don't think you need to hire anybody. I think you need the third level of the leadership pipeline. You don't have that in your
Mhm.
structure. And if
Mhm.
you did, it'd be a game changer. And so I made her go through her roster and identify people that could fill that role. She identified a lady who's a volunteer level, team member level in children's ministry at their church, who is the trainer at the local school district for all the teachers. And
Yeah.
she never even thought about it. And so she was like, I'm calling her this afternoon. She identified 4 names of people that could step into that mid level and do a rotation of leadership there. And she was so excited. I looked at that pastor and said, I just saved you $60,000
Yeah.
because you're
Wow.
going to use high capacity leaders.
So is it just because it's just easier to hire? Is it quicker to hire? It doesn't require the
So
time investment?
what we do is we feel pain and we want to solve the pain.
Mhm.
So we go find a band-aid. A band-aid is a doer. Okay, we need somebody that's going to do this ministry. We
Uh-huh.
need somebody that's going to do these tasks. And we put a band-aid on it. And so what it does, it alleviates the administrative problems and some of those task-oriented problems that we're experiencing.
Right.
It doesn't help you scale that ministry. It doesn't grow it because you hired a doer,
Right.
not a developer.
Right.
And so that person that you put in that role, yes, they alleviate the pain, but they can't grow the ministry. A year to 2 years later, you're frustrated with them because their area is not growing. Why? Because they're the bottleneck. They're the bottleneck.
Yeah.
We're doing it all.
So a lot of what you've described, like in the way that you're doing things, is all relational. Like nothing so far has just sounded like so complex with algorithms and spreadsheets. And I'm sure there's some presentation, I'm sure, I know there's structure there, but you describe, hey, get here 15 minutes early, stay 15 minutes late. Let's have a conversation. I had breakfast, coffees, lunches, dinners. Like a lot of this is just hanging out with people and being intentional is what I'm hearing.
So here's what Jesus did. So if you look at the life of Christ in chronological order, it's fascinating. Most people don't do that. But if you look at it in chronological order, Jesus comes on the scene with his baptism and his temptation in the fall of 26 AD, right? He meets 5 of what would be his apostles, but they're not even his disciples at this point. All right. He just meets them. He hangs out with them. He goes to a wedding with them. He goes visits their hometown of Capernaum. And then he goes and does his early Judean ministry. It's 1 year later, in the fall of 27 AD, he moves to Capernaum. Jesus moves to Capernaum, increases his proximity around these guys, and says, hey, follow me and I'll make you fishers of men. That was a rabbi making an official invitation for them to follow him full time. So he's inviting them into followership, not leadership. He disciples them for 9 months. All right, 9 months. And then it's 21 months into his public ministry. It's fascinating. 21 months into his public ministry, Jesus goes on a mountain and he prays all night long. Luke says he comes down from the mountain that next morning and he's prayed all night without ceasing. That's the only time that Greek word is used of Jesus. Did not sleep, prayed all night. Why? Because he's getting ready to make the most strategic decision in his public ministry at this point. So he gets down the bottom of the mountain, calls all of his disciples to himself. We don't know how many were there, but it was the height of his popularity. So there could have been hundreds, there could have been thousands. And from that crowd, Luke says, he chose 12. And so you can imagine 100, 200,000 people there. And he says, hey, Peter, James, John, Andrew, Simon, Thomas, Nathaniel, Philip, come follow me. Come follow me. Everybody else, you're dismissed. And it's at that point, 21 months into Jesus' public ministry, he begins to spend a disproportionate amount of time with a few people in order to impact many. Now, what he did over the next 6 months was significant. It is my favorite part of the whole chronology of the life of Christ. Over the next 6 months, he intentionally apprentices them. It's intense apprenticeship. He's giving them teaching. He's giving them crazy experiences. He's going on a tour through the 240 villages of Galilee, preaching the kingdom of God and saying, watch me preach the kingdom of God because I'm getting ready to send you out to preach the kingdom of God. So he does 6 months of apprenticing, and then he sends them out 2 by 2 to do it on their own. Yeah. Then in 29 AD, he does 4 cross-cultural mission trips where he leaves the boundaries of Israel with these 12 to get away from crowds, to get away from people, to do intensified retreats, experiences, and training with them, to ready them so that when he departs in the spring of 30, that he's empowered them to go make disciples of all nations. He hung out with them. He built relationship with them, but he vetted them for 21 months to make sure I'm choosing the right people to invest in because I'm going to choose developers that multiply themselves.
So you're suggesting that Jesus knew what he was doing.
Knew what he was doing.
Imagine that. Imagine that. Wow, that's incredible. And those guys they had some issues. They weren't perfect, but Jesus saw something in them. And it wasn't that they were amazing leaders already.
In the fall of 29 AD, 2 times he caught them arguing who was going to be the greatest.
Yeah.
And then in the spring of 30 AD, before his crucifixion, he caught them arguing who was going to be the greatest.
Yeah.
So they weren't perfect. They weren't even, they still had a lot of growth, but he still.
Yeah. Wow. No, that's awesome. That's awesome. So yeah, we're not talking complicated, crazy structures and all kinds of sitting in lectures for hours and hours and hours and filling in the blanks. Right. There may be some of that, but we're actually talking about showing people just how to live. Man, that's so good. I remember one of the things my youth pastor did was he started a leadership team. And so when I became a youth pastor, that's one of the first things I did was start a leadership team. And just because I just did what he did. And I spent more time with them, but it wasn't long before you start catching flack from parents because you're not spending as much time with their kid. You're spending all this time with leaders. And but I didn't really apologize for it. And so we say pastor's got to be ready for that. You're gonna catch some flack for that.
Yep. 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 Yeah. Yeah. Because what we're doing is, here's what I tell people all the time. I was teaching this to a group of pastors in Scotland, and I could tell there was a funny look on their face. But I was talking about delegating, spend a disproportionate amount of time with a few in order to impact the many. There was a funny look on their face, and I was like, "All right, guys, what are you thinking? What do you think? What's going on? You're hesitant." They went, "If we did what you said, we'd be fired." I said, "Okay, I get it. I understand it. But here's my question: do you want to build your church around cultural norms or biblical principles? Because you see, what happens is we get intimidated by church culture. We bend our activities, we bend our values, we bend the way we spend time, we bend our behaviors towards church culture instead of biblical principles. And say, what's Scripture tell us?
Yeah.
What did Jesus model? Let's do what he did. Let's do what Scripture commands us.
Yeah.
And then that's a game changer.
Yeah. Well, so man, this is good stuff. I could talk about this all day. But to start to wrap things up here, what if I'm a pastor? I'm shifting my thinking. I think one of the things I would suggest is get some of Mac's resources for sure. So by the way, if people are interested in getting your books, learning more about you, what do they need to do?
Yeah, go to multiplygroup.org. And if you go to multiplygroup.org/ebook, there's an ebook there called Rethinking Leadership Development. And that would be a great place to start, just to really challenge it. It's 10 shifts that help you make 10 paradigm shifts in the way you think about leadership development.
Gotcha. Perfect. So yeah, definitely go check that out. And so if I'm a pastor and I want to fill this pipeline, what kind of things do I need to start like looking for? Because like it stuck with me a minute ago when you were saying you had this guy who was like the president of a bank. So you put him, I thought you were about to say, I put him in charge of the finances. You said, no, I put him in charge of small groups. Then you were like, then there was this, I don't know, most of the positions you said that they had in their work life, it was like, okay, you're in charge of HR at work. All right, we're going to make you the missions guy. So like, it wasn't necessarily, all right, you deal with money at work, you're going to deal with money at church. So what are the things that we're looking for?
Yeah. What I'm looking for, there are two answers to the question. All right. First, if I'm looking for a general volunteer or a small group leader, team leader, something like that, I'm looking for teachability, integrity, and passion. Okay. Now, if I'm looking for somebody for the upper levels of the pipeline as a volunteer, that third level, maybe that like a small group coach, or fourth level, like your volunteer youth director, volunteer children's director, those sort of things, higher capacity leader, then what I'm looking for is it's sort of what Paul told Timothy. Paul told Timothy, said, all right, now, Timothy, you are the pastor. You're the pastor of Ephesus. You're overseeing the churches in Ephesus. And so 2 Timothy 2:2, I want you to take the things that you heard from me. That Greek word means the things that you heard, that you applied and integrated into your leadership. So the things that I taught you that literally impacted you and transformed you, I want you to take those things and serve them up. It's to entrust to reliable men. That Greek word is to serve up a meal. I want you to entrust those things like a meal, serving up a meal. Now, I can't make somebody eat, but I can make that meal smell good and look good. All right. So I want to take that leadership development. I will serve it up to what type of man? Reliable man. And he gives us this little qualifier that so many people miss, that are able to teach others also. And so now what I'm looking for at that upper level, I'm looking for people who have proven track record of leadership and who are leadership reproducers. I'm not looking for a doer. I'm looking for a developer. And so once I get to level 3 and level 4 of the pipeline, I'm looking for people who can develop other leaders.
Yeah.
And that's hard in the church today because we don't expect that. We're not looking for that. We don't train for that. I tell church staff all the time, your job isn't just to raise up leaders. Your job is to raise up developers, to develop developers.
Mhm.
And so I'll give you a simple example. My wife started leading a small group of women at our church a little over a year ago. And after like the first semester, she took my book, Leading Others, which is a discipleship training manual to apprentice new leaders. She took that book. She identified 3 women in her small group. And so they would meet for small group on Tuesday. And then every other week on a Thursday, she would meet with them and take them through one chapter of Leading Others. Then she'd give them opportunity to lead in the context of her group. And at the end of the semester, she's like, okay, who's ready to lead their own group? And so she birthed 3 new groups. Well, this semester, she's doing it again. 3 women every week. They meet in a small group. Every other week, they're going through Leading Others and learning the 5 competencies for leading a small group. And so she'll launch 3 more small groups, brand new groups. Now she's a stay-at-home grandmama and she's cranking out leaders. And by the way, the 3 leaders she trained last semester are taking 2 women each through Leading Others. So those 3 women are going to produce 6 brand new small group leaders. And just from Cindy's leadership alone, produce 12 brand new small group leaders by the end of this semester.
Wow. Wow.
It's just that easy. And that's why I wrote the Discipling Leaders series, because there's a book for every level of the leadership pipeline. And all you do is grab 2 people, 3 people at most, and just walk them through the content every other week. And it's a transformational training. It's not an information dump, because they have to read it, read the chapter, they have to put it into practice, and they have to sit and debrief what they're learning with you. And so that process is built into the content, which makes it transformational content, which is different than every other leadership book out there.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. There's plenty of, like you said in the beginning, there's plenty of content talking about leadership, but as far as really practical teaching you how to do it, there's not a lot out there. And so, I mean, like if we don't get this figured out, if we don't start really developing leaders instead of just recruiting prepackaged, you know, a handful of leaders that we've already got that may or may not have stole from another church or something, then it's going to be a mess. I don't know. I don't know that I don't want to say like that. It doesn't kill the church, but some churches are going to. It's not going to get any better if we don't get these things in place. Developing leaders.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's huge.
Yeah. I see it everywhere I go. Churches are struggling to find staff members. They're struggling to find leaders.
Mhm.
So many churches I love this. So many churches want to reproduce and plant more churches, but they're struggling to find church planters. I'm going, we shouldn't be trying to find them. We should be developing them. And so what's happened is we've got a discipleship problem. The fruit of the problem is we can't find staff and we can't find church planters. We don't have upper level leaders. The root of the problem is we've stopped discipling leaders. We disciple people to live like Jesus, but we don't disciple them to lead like Jesus. And that's what this Discipling Leaders book series is all about. It's discipling people to lead like Jesus. And the transformational process is built into the content so that when you sit and you talk to somebody about the content, every chapter is focused on a competency and a character trait. So every chapter, they're learning one competency, like leading others. They're learning how to disciple other people. They're learning how to provide feedback. They're learning how to deal with different personalities. They're learning how to troubleshoot, how to team build, how to identify and apprentice new leaders. So they're learning very specific competencies that will help them succeed in those roles. But they just need somebody to process that content with them and give them the experience to try those skills in a safe environment.
Yeah. Wow. So last question, if I'm you're talking to a pastor and he says, okay, look, I'm bivocational or something. I got a ton of stuff on me. I know I need to do this. I read your book. Of course, your book may answer this question, so he might not be asking this question. But if someone were to say, all right, well, look, this month I can take one action.
Yeah,
I can do one thing.
Yep.
What would you say? What would you say to him?
Yeah, I tell people all the time, it's as easy as this, regardless of what how much time you have. All right. Find two, find two existing leaders in your church that you have high confidence in that you would love to reproduce. And you say, I want to meet with you every other week, and I'm going to go through leading others with you, and we're going to learn these competencies in this book.
Mhm.
And we're going to learn and we're going to grow together. Now, at the end of taking them through that, at the end of the semester, you've taken two of your best leaders through that book. You get two more books or four more books. You give each one of them two books. And you say, now I want you to find two potential leaders each, and you raise up two new potential leaders. I want you to do it this semester. I want you to do it again next semester, and again next semester, and again next semester. And so you're developing developers. And the way you do that is simply model it for them once and release them to go start developing others. The pastor shouldn't be raising up all the leaders. The pastor should be focusing on developing developers. And that's the way you do it. You
Yeah.
identify the best ones around you, reliable men who are able to teach others also.
Yeah.
But then you got to put the content in their hands and say, now I want to challenge you, start meeting with two potential leaders in the context of your team or group and raise them up, apprentice them, disciple them in leadership, and then challenge them to start a new group or new team.
Awesome. Awesome.
That
Man,
easy. That
that's
easy.
good stuff. That's good stuff. Well, Mac, thanks so much. This has been incredible. Everybody, if you're watching, listening, you need to go to multiplygroup.org. Some great resources there. And you said, we'll put this in the notes. You said multiplygroup.org/ebook, and
Ebook.
we can download. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Free
Definitely.
download.
Go get that. Go get that. And Mac, are you on social media, Mac?
I am. Instagram is MACLAKE24, Mac Lake 2.
Got it. All right. Well, go follow Mac and make sure you subscribe to the Pro Church Marketing Podcast. Thanks so much for listening or watching or whatever you're doing. And follow us because we're always giving out church marketing tips, leadership tips, church growth tips. Because at the end of the day, we want to see local churches that love Jesus and teach the Bible showing up all over the place so that you're the obvious choice when somebody's looking for a church. So thanks again.